Good evening, America. Welcome to the World News. I'm your host, Jack Creeves, and with me today is economist Justin Brar. Here to guide us through the financial crisis and what has happened to get us into the position we're in now. Justin, good to have you on. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for asking. Thanks for having me on. Okay, I'm going to try to break this down to as simple as I can for the audience.
All right.
Let's start in the early 2000s. The housing market was perfect for home buyers. Mortgage interest rates were low, property values were on the rise. This got the attention of many Americans, and they began taking out loans to hop on the ship before it sailed. For the banks, property was good collateral, so they were not afraid to give mortgages to those who were not particularly reliable. These mortgages were called subprime mortgages, and they were sold to people who had bad credit or a history of financial instability. So these subprime mortgage owners would take out large mortgages, often under stated income loans, to buy homes, and initially they would have low interest rates. These were called teaser rates, and the catch was that eventually the interest rates would rise. And when they were unable to afford their mortgage payments, they would default their houses and the bank would take them over again. But before owners would default their houses, they would get secondary mortgages to access the cash from the equity of their rising house value. This would give them cash, but it would leave them with even higher interest rates. And eventually they would have to default. This created a dangerous situation if the market were to change. The problem got even worse when investors began taking large shares of bundles of prime and subprime mortgages sold by banks in hope to get high reward investment from the favorable market. The crisis occurred when the market growth halted and millions of mortgage owners defaulted in a short period of time, thus forcing the banks to lose money on their foreclosures, and investors simultaneously lost money on their investments. This ultimately caused a recession.
Too big to fail? What does that mean to you? Could you explain it to the audience and give us a better interpretation of it?
Well, in a gist, too big to fail means that when companies get big enough, their failure would mean it would have a catastrophic impact on the entire economy. But as we have seen previously, even the biggest of banks like Lehman Brothers can fail. This happened because investors pulled their money out of the banks when they saw the sketchy circumstances from all the defaulted mortgages. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are another example of how no agency is untouchable. Fannie and Freddie were insuring more than half of all American mortgages, and they were forced to be bailed out by the Fed in order to stabilize themselves. In the case of AIG, which may perhaps be the most important, they and many other companies were bailed out by TARP in order to create stability in the market. So overall, Jack, nobody is ever too big to fail. It's just that when so many people depend on these large companies, the government cannot allow them to fail.
Now we transition to Hubert Humphrey III, who is interviewing homeowner Gerald Goober about the effect of the crisis.
Thank you, Jack. All right, Gerald, how has the market affected you?
Well, it's actually terrible. I bought this house a little bit ago when the market was rising at about 900,000. Market was going up, went all the way to 1.3 million, so I got a second mortgage trying to access that equity, and the market just fell, and now I'm stuck. I had to foreclose my house, and I can't even pay my bills anymore. Worst mistake of my life.
All right, back to you, Jack.
Very interesting. Also now on the line is Yale economics professor Chase Markarian to give his 2 cents on the topic. Chase?
Thanks. The financial crisis was primarily caused by deregulation in the financial industry. This permitted banks to engage in hedge fund trading with dividends. Banks then demanded more mortgages to support the profitable sale of these derivatives. They created interest-only loans that became affordable to subprime borrowers. Then, as interest rates on these new mortgages reset, housing prices started falling as the supply outpaced the demand. When the values of these derivatives crumbled, banks stopped lending to each other, thus leading to the crisis.
Thanks for the insight, Chase. Justin, it was good having you on.
Thank you.
Now, a quick commercial break, but stay tuned for the weather report at 7.
Let's be completely honest. No company wants to go through this. But we're not witnessing the end of the American car. We're witnessing the rebirth of the American car. General Motors needs to start over in order to get stronger. There was a time when 8 different brands made sense. Not anymore. There was a time when our cost structure could compete worldwide. Not anymore. Reinvention is the only way we can fix this. And fix it, we will. So here's what the new GM is going to be. Fewer, stronger brands. Fewer, stronger models. Greater efficiencies, better fuel economy, and new technologies. Leaner, greener, faster, smarter. This is not about going out of business. This is about getting down to business. Because the only chapter we're focused on is chapter 1.
I'm Kristen. We're gonna head on into the interview.
Chris, was it buying American important to you?
I wasn't going to buy another car that was bailed out by our government. I was going to buy from a manufacturer that's standing on their own, win, lose, or draw. That's what America's about, is taking the chance to succeed and understanding when you fail that you got to pick yourself up and go back to work. Ford is that company for me.
Today, folks, we have a cold front moving down from the north, and today on the East Coast, it's pretty nice. 60s, 70s, you know, you can go out, have a good time, and we're moving on to the West Coast here, and it's going to be a hot one, so I'd suggest you get your shades on and, you know, maybe put on some sunscreen. But besides that, folks, have a great day, and here's your weather. Now moving on, we have an automotive industry specialist, John Green, here to explain the auto crisis.
Thanks, Jack. The automotive crisis was due to a combination of years of declining automotive sales and an increase of scarcity of credit availability due to the state of the banks and the economy. People were receiving crippling car loans and were subject to predatory lending. What we are seeing now is almost a mirror image of the subprime mortgage crisis. People are getting cars they can't afford with loans they can't repay. And on top of this, they're having to pay sky-high gas prices. This is the first time we are seeing gas break $4. And many average Americans cannot keep up. Not only are the average Americans struggling financially, but the big three car companies like GM, Ford, and Chrysler are as well.
So, about the big three, what is your take on the recent plea for help on Capitol Hill?
Well, when GM and Chrysler announced that they were on the verge of bankruptcy, President Bush was forced to step in and temporarily bail out GM and Chrysler in order to keep the auto industry alive. He ended up giving $80 billion under the TARP program to do so. Ford never filed bankruptcy, but they were forced to make large cutbacks on jobs and production, and they asked for money to keep up with their competitors. Before, there were way too many unprofitable sister companies coming from GM, so after the government takeover, they made cutbacks on how many lines of cars were produced to help combat the market.
You made some great points, Chase. Thank you for having me on. Hope to see you again sometime.
Thanks, Jack.
Breaking news. This just in that despite McCain's campaign postponement, President-elect Barack Obama will become the 44th President of the United States.
It's been a long time coming, but tonight, because of what we did on this day, change has come to America.
As Bush's term comes to an end, he hands over the not-so-strong economy to soon-to-be President Barack Obama. Only time can tell if he can turn this tide around. For now, all we can do is stay optimistic. I'm Jack Krebs, your host, and see you next time on the World News.